Hello and welcome. President Yoon Suk Yeol and U.S. President Joe Biden held summit talks in Washington on April 26. The two leaders celebrated the accomplishments of the 70-year-old Korea-U.S. alliance and had in-depth discussions on how the alliance should develop in the years to come. Now, marking President Yoon's state visit to the U.S., we examine the present and future of the Seoul-Washington alliance that's been actively evolving amid the rapidly changing geopolitical situation and growing uncertainties across the globe. We also explore the achievements of the ROK-U.S. alliance and the challenges that lie ahead. Forging Ahead Korea-U.S. alliance begins now. Exceptional would best describe the latest Yoon-Biden summit. Let's first go over the key events and highlights of President Yoon's U.S. trip by putting things in numbers. President Yoon's visit to Washington this time around, unlike previous official or working trips, was met with the highest protocol. President Biden greeted his South Korean counterpart with a review of the honor guard and a 21-gun salute, the highest honor rendered. This marked the third meeting between the two leaders. That means there were 3 rounds of ROK-U.S. summit talks in less than a year since President Yoon took office, a result of strengthened ties between Seoul and his biggest ally. Plus, President Yoon's latest trip marked the second state visit by a foreign leader under the Biden administration. In December, French President Emmanuel Macron traveled to the U.S. on a rare state visit, which makes President Yoon the first leader from the Asia-Pacific region to make a state visit to Washington. Then, what exactly is a state visit? We asked an AI-powered chatbot, and this is the answer it gave us. State visits are typically ceremonial and aim to strengthen political, economic, and cultural ties between the two countries. During a state visit, the visiting head of state is usually received with full honors, including military honors, official banquets, and other formal events. Quite an accurate and detailed definition of a state visit. Well, President Yoon's week-long stay in the U.S. has been an important turning point in further solidifying Seoul's ties with Washington. Let's now review the key events that were on his itinerary there. President Yoon Suk Yeol and First Lady Kim Gun-hee board the Code 1 presidential aircraft. Yoon embarked on a 7-day state visit to the U.S., becoming the first South Korean leader to do so in 12 years. As he arrived at Andrews Air Force Base, a U.S. military band played the national anthems of South Korea and the U.S. Yoon and Kim were greeted by key U.S. government officials, including the U.S. State Department's chief of protocol. During their U.S. visit, the South Korean first couple stayed at Blair House, which is a 5-minute walk from the White House. The U.S. government offers the 199-year-old presidential guest house to accommodate state guests like foreign heads of state or dignitaries. At Blair House, Yoon held an unexpected meeting with Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos. At the meeting, Netflix announced plans to invest nearly $2.5 billion in K-contents over the next 4 years.
콘텐츠 산업과 창작자 그리고 넷플릭스 모두에게 큰 기회가 될 것입니다. 넷플릭스의 파격적인 투자 결정을 진심으로 환영합니다.
Yoon then attended a meeting with Korean expatriates in the U.S. and underscored the meaning of the state visit, saying that South Korea-U.S. relations are not a business deal, but an alliance forged in blood to defend freedom.
지금의 한미 동맹에서 더 나아가 미래로 전진하는 행동하는 동맹이라는 획기적이고 역사적인 이정표를 만들고자 합니다.
On his second day in the U.S., Yoon visited Arlington National Cemetery, which honors 215,000 U.S. fallen soldiers and veterans. When Yoon was passing through the main entrance, a 21-gun salute was fired, and the Korean national anthem and a requiem were performed. In front of the tomb of the unknown soldier, the South Korean president, placing a hand on his chest, paid respects to fallen U.S. service members. At a luncheon celebrating the 17th anniversary of the bilateral alliance, Yoon awarded South Korea's highest military order, the Taeguk Order of Military Merit, to 3 U.S. veterans of the Korean War, including retired Army Colonel Ralph Puckett. The president then visited NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. He hoped that the two countries' cooperation in the space industry will develop into a space alliance.
가치 동맹인 한미 동맹의 영역이 지구를 넘어 우주로 확대되고 앞으로 새로운 한미 동맹 70년의 중심에 우주 동맹이 있기를 기대합니다.
With their summit a day away, U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden invited Yoon and Kim to the White House. Biden gave a baseball bat and glove as a gift to Yoon, a known baseball fan. In return, Yoon gave the Bidens a traditional Korean jar emblazoned with mother of pearl. The meeting lasted for 1.5 hours, far longer than the originally scheduled 30 minutes. The Bidens, Yoon and Kim, then visited the Wall of Remembrance at the Korean War Veterans Memorial. They laid a flower wreath in front of the wall and took a walk around the park. This marked the first time in 28 years that the leaders of the two countries visited the memorial together. On the day of the ROK-U.S. summit, an official welcome ceremony was held on the lawn of the White House. With 200 U.S. honor guard holding the national flags of the two countries and a red carpet rolled out, the Bidens came out early to greet Yoon and Kim. Yoon and Kim were welcomed warmly and cordially. While shaking hands with each of U.S. cabinet members, Yoon arrived at the South Lawn. As Yoon and Biden took the podium, a 21-gun salute was given and the two countries' national anthems were performed. The two leaders highlighted the meaning of the 70-year alliance forged in blood.
한미 동맹은 자유를 위한 투쟁의 결과 탄생한 혈맹입니다. 한미 동맹은 이익에 따라 만나고 헤어지는 거래 관계가 아닙니다. 한미 동맹은 자유라는 보편적 가치를 수호하기 위한 가치 동맹입니다.
This year marks the 70th anniversary of the alliance between our two nations. It's an unbreakable bond, forged in bravery and the sacrifice of our people. We go together. May we continue that refrain of the Republic of Korea and the United States for all the days ahead. We go together.
Following an 80-minute summit, Presidents Yoon and Biden announced a joint statement. They also adopted the Washington Declaration, which focuses on establishing a nuclear consultative group. 6 more joint statements were signed on boosting bilateral cooperation in new technology development, cybersecurity, science, and space exploration. Later in the day, the two presidents gathered together dressed in tuxedos. At a state dinner hosted by President Biden in the East Room, Yoon likened the Korea-U.S. alliance to finding a 4-leaf clover in front of the 200 guests. Biden proposed a toast to the bilateral ties for the new 170 years.
우정은 네잎 클로바 같아서 찾기는 어렵지만 일단 갖게 되면 그것은 행운이다라는 속담이 있습니다. 우리의 강철 같은 동맹을 위하여
to our ironclad alliance.
But I've never been more optimistic, and I mean that I've never been more optimistic about our nations, what we can achieve together if we continue to work together as allies and as friends.
During the state dinner at the request of Biden, Yoon delivered his rendition of Don McLean's American Pie, which he said was one of his favorite songs in school. The 70-year alliance was celebrated in a festive mood amid hearty cheers and acclamation. On April 27th, President Yoon delivered an address at a joint session of the U.S. Congress and presented a blueprint for bilateral alliance amid standing ovations. He also visited the U.S. Department of Defense and received a briefing about the U.S. Strategic Surveillance System and Crisis Response System. He's the first South Korean president to visit the Pentagon. On April 28th, Yoon wrapped up the 7-day visit after delivering an address at Harvard Kennedy School in Boston. President Yoon's state visit to the U.S. this time around that was met with an outstanding welcome is significant as it comes at a time when the two countries are celebrating the 70th anniversary of their alliance. 70 years have passed since the two sides have signed their Mutual Defense Treaty in 1953. Then how strong is the alliance? The AI-driven chatbot replied, Korea alliance is one of the strongest and oldest alliances in the world. We also asked how important the alliance is to each country. First, to the question, how important is the U.S. to South Korea? The chatbot says Korea continues to face threats and confrontations from North Korea, and the U.S. provides security support for defense against North Korea. With military support from the U.S., Korea is able to prepare for potential attacks from North Korea. It's underlying the ironclad security guarantee provided by Washington. Then what does South Korea mean to the U.S. as an ally? Here's what the chatbot says. South Korea is the United States' sixth largest trading partner and a major market for American goods and services. In terms of security, South Korea hosts approximately 28,500 U.S. troops and plays a key role in regional security efforts to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. A crucial alliance for both nations in terms of the economy and national security. Why don't we explore its 7-decade history and significance? President Yoon Suk Yeol appeared in the U.S. Capitol building, a symbol of liberty and democracy. He's the 7th South Korean leader and the first one in 10 years since former President Park Geun-hye to deliver an address before the U.S. Congress.
A new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. I stand before that nation with a conviction of freedom, belief in the alliance, and the resolve to open a new future.
Yoon looked back on the history of the 70-year alliance and recalled the moments of the two allies' joint efforts to safeguard free democracy.
Our alliance is for justice. Our alliance is for peace. Our alliance is for prosperity. I look forward to everyone being on board for our new journey together.
Amid a standing ovation and enthusiastic responses from members of the U.S. Congress, Yoon reiterated the value of the Korea-U.S. alliance. What is the starting point of this staunch, unwavering alliance between South Korea and the U.S.? The Korean War broke out on June 25, 1950, with North Korea's invasion of South Korea. The U.S. immediately called on the UN Security Council to convene a session. United Nations forces dispatched by 16 countries fought along with South Korea against North Korea. But the war ended with the two Koreas divided. In July 1953, the armistice went into effect. South Korea needed strong military alliance in preparation against possible reinvasion by North Korea. In October 1953, South Korea signed a mutual defense treaty with the U.S.
한미 공동방위조약의 역사적인 도입, 우리나라를 대표한 현 외무부 장관과 미국을 대표한 덜레드 장관 사이에 성립되었습니다.
The mutual defense treaty, under which the two countries pledged to intervene if any of them is invaded, has been playing a pivotal role in discouraging North Korea's provocations for the past 70 years. The U.S. provided $300 million in military aid annually until the 1960s. That amounted to 87% of South Korea's defense budget. The U.S. also aided South Korea with emergency relief and post-war restoration activities, which are said to have been a driving force that further solidified the Korea-U.S. alliance following the armistice.
항상 위협에 노출되어 있는 한국 국민의 입장에서는 이 한미 동맹이라는 것이 마치 공기와도 같은 그런 이제 것이다라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 동맹이 가지고 있는 그런 평화라는 것이 사실 한국민으로서 한국에서 자고 일어나고 먹고 이런 모든 일상사에서 사실 우리는 모르지만 공기처럼 항상 존재하는 그런 공공재적인 의미를 가지고 있고 그것이 시작된 것이 바로 1953년의 한미동맹이라고 볼 수가 있습니다.
The bilateral ties evolved from a benefactor-beneficiary model to a mutually complementary one, with South Korea's participation in the Vietnam War in 1964. The number of U.S. forces stationed in South Korea once decreased, but the ROK-U.S. Combined Forces Command was established in 1978, consolidating their joint defense system and alliance. South Korea has been taking on a greater role in national security since the launch of the civilian government in 1993. In 1994, the Korean military retook peacetime control of its armed forces, which had been under the USFK commander since the Korean War.
오늘부터 새로운 제2의 장군이라고 생각해도 과언이 아니다 이렇게 생각이 됩니다.
In the 2000s, the relations were further upgraded to a strategic partnership and then to a reciprocal complementary alliance. It was partly due to sudden changes in the security environment at home and abroad, such as the 9/11 attacks, and South Korea's growth in national power, shown in its per capita GDP exceeding $20,000 in 2006. In a summit held in April 2008, the presidents of South Korea and the U.S. upgraded the bilateral ties from a traditional friendship to a strategic alliance for the 21st century. The upgrade turned the previous security-focused alliance into a more comprehensive one that covers political, economic, social, and cultural sectors.
자국 영토에 외국의 군대를 주둔시켜서 북한의 위협을 억제하고 또 최근 들어서는 부상하는 중국에 대응하는 이러한 사례는 세계사적으로 유례가 없는 매우 특이한 경우다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수가 있습니다. 미국이 일방적으로 한국의 안보를 지켜주던 그러한 형태에서 최근 들어서는 한미 양국의 대등한 파트너십으로 발전되었다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수가 있습니다.
In May of last year, South Korea and the U.S. opened a new chapter in their bilateral relations through a summit between Presidents Yoon Suk Yeol and Joe Biden.
이번 회담에서 우리 두 사람은 한미 동맹을 글로벌 포괄적 전략 동맹으로 발전시켜 나간다는 목표를 공유하고 그 이행 방안을 긴밀히 논의하였습니다.
Under the Global Comprehensive Strategic Alliance, the two countries renewed their relations by pledging to expand cooperation in a variety of fields, from economic security to technology, and to jointly address global issues beyond the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia.
이제 한국과는 단순한 그런 정치적인 아니면 경제적인 가치를 공유하는 것에서 넘어서서 정치, 경제, 사회, 문화의 모든 면에서 전략적으로 파트너십을 구축하는 그런 뭔가 포괄적인 전략 동맹이 되었다. 그래서 이제 군사안보적인 측면에서 시작해서 모든 측면으로까지 협력이 확대되는, 사실 동맹으로서는 역사를 유례를 찾아보기 힘든 그런 성공 사례가 아닌가 그렇게 생각을 합니다.
Experts assess that marking the 70-year alliance, President Yoon Suk Yeol's state visit has served to further strengthen bilateral cooperation based on shared common values.
전략 동맹이라고 하는 것은 동맹의 결속력의 수준을 이야기하는 거거든요. 이번 한미 정상회담을 평가해 보면 한미 정상 간의 협력 의제가 과거에 비해서 획기적으로 다변화되고 광범위하게 발전했다. 이 부분을 우선 지적할 수가 있고요. 지금 한반도의 안보 위기를 조성하고 있는 북핵 위협으로부터 그 국민들을 안심시킬 수 있는 그런 계기가 되었다. 이렇게도 볼 수가 있겠습니다.
The Korea-U.S. alliance started as a tool to thwart North Korean provocations and ensure the security of the Korean Peninsula. Amid a myriad of changes, the two allies are continuing to widen their cooperation, growing into each other's interdependent partner. The security alliance that was created with the signing of the Mutual Defense Treaty has now been upgraded into a global comprehensive strategic alliance. In particular, the alliance that's been in the spotlight recently is in the economic and technological sectors. And President Yoon's latest state visit to the U.S. is thought to have contributed to further strengthening cooperation in these fields, while looking back at how far the two countries' relations have come. Then why don't we ask the chatbot how much the South Korean economy has grown over the past 70 years under the alliance? The South Korean economy has benefited greatly from its alliance with the United States. The alliance has provided South Korea with a stable and secure environment, which has allowed the country to focus on economic development and growth. In addition, the alliance has facilitated trade and investment between the two countries. The United States has been a major market for South Korean exports, particularly in the areas of electronics, automobiles, and steel. The United States has also been a major source of foreign investment in South Korea, which has helped to modernize the country's economy and industries. Specific numbers also show how much the economy has developed over the decades. South Korea's GDP per capita, which stood at just $67 back in 1953, has now topped $32,000 as of 2022. So we can see that within this framework of the Seoul-Washington alliance, South Korea was able to grow into a major economy in the world. From future advanced technologies to the economy and security. Let's now take a look at what kind of agreements were reached between the two leaders during their talks and what kind of goals the two allies should pursue moving forward. Throughout the visit to the U.S., President Yoon Suk Yeol described himself as a salesperson for Korea. He met with the CEO of Tesla and asked him to invest in Korea. The president signed an agreement on Korea's participation in NASA's manned lunar exploration project. He also attended a roundtable meeting of Korean and American business people. As a result of his active sales pitch, U.S. businesses promised to invest in Korea's cultural industry and core technologies like hydrogen energy, small modular reactors, and advanced materials.
여러분들께서 한국에 마음껏 투자하고 큰 성공을 할 수 있도록 저희 정부도 세계 최고의 투자 환경을 만들겠습니다.
During Yoon's visit, U.S. businesses announced plans to invest some $5.9 billion in Korea.
Netflix is perhaps the best example of a win-win partnership between the United States and South Korea. Netflix has provided a platform that has helped spread Korean culture around the globe, while at the same time, Netflix has profited significantly from the ability and the creativeness of those South Korean creators. And so it's been a real benefit to both sides to take and be able to work together on content around the globe.
In the summit, the two countries reconfirmed their solid alliance in the economy. In particular, they agreed to share economic achievements through cooperation in cutting-edge industries.
저와 바이든 대통령은 최근 반도체, 전기차, 배터리를 포함한 첨단 기술 분야에서 양국 기업 간 상호 투자가 확대되고 있는 것을 환영하였습니다.
To achieve the goal, Korea and the U.S. will create a control tower under their national security offices, which will be tasked with overseeing the bilateral high-tech cooperation. The U.S. promised to not spare support to Korean businesses, dispelling concerns about its Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act that were thought to have put Korean businesses at a disadvantage in the U.S. market.
It's generating significant economic growth in America and not hurting anybody. And by the way, it's creating jobs in South Korea. It's creating jobs in South Korea, not just with SK, but anyway, with Samsung and other industries. So I think it's a win-win.
In addition to conventional industries, the two countries are paying attention to new future technology projects involving AI and quantum technology.
When we look at many of the emerging technologies, be they quantum computing, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and other areas that President Yoon is hoping to expand the alliance into, these are going to be the critical economic and national security issues of the future. When we think about the future growth of the economy, quantum computing has the ability to take and significantly boost the ability for computers to take and do computations, which will take and lead to new discoveries. Artificial intelligence is similar in this way in that it will be able to take and comb through and combine information in ways that we perhaps don't even understand at this point.
They will also actively cooperate in establishing supply chains for the future eco-friendly energy industry like hydrogen, nuclear energy, and carbon neutrality.
If we look at how the joint statement is structured, there is an emphasis on climate change and clean tech. And I think this is a real growth opportunity and area for the alliance, and one to where there's not only the opportunity to transition to new types of energy, which will bring new manufacturing jobs, but also to take and lessen the possibility of economic coercion by other countries.
The beginning of this expansive, ideal partnership dates back to 70 years ago. Following the Korean War, South Korea's economy was in ruins. At that time, South Korea's per capita income was lower than that of African countries like Ghana or Gabon. It was aid from the U.S. and the UN that helped South Korea rebuild its economy and achieve rapid economic development in the 1960s. Between 1949 and 1961, South Korea received about $2.7 billion in economic aid from America alone.
67달러의 1953년 1인당 GDP에서 2022년 현재는 거의 32,000불 정도까지로 1인당 GDP가 엄청나게 증가를 했으니까 이 정도의 눈부진 경제 성장을 한 나라도 드물겠죠. 그 드문 배경에는 이제 강력한 안보 동맹이 이제 안보 쪽에는 더 이상의 비용을 들이지 않고 그 비용을 여러 가지 국가 기관 산업이라든지 뭐 이제 그런 쪽으로 돌려서 훨씬 더 이제 국가를 부강하게 만드는데 쓸 수 있었다는 그런 이제 장점이 있다고 볼 수가 있겠습니다.
With the safe spending on security, South Korea focused on economic development in the 1960s under 2 rounds of 5-year plans. Unlike Latin American countries that opted for strategies to nurture domestic industries instead of export-friendly policies, South Korea pursued a path of export-driven growth thanks to U.S. support. In the 1960s and 70s, the U.S. was following the trade policy of protectionism. But when it came to South Korea, it made an exception and gave a preferential trade status.
이 당시 박정희 정부가 수출 지향적 성장 정책을 추진할 수 있었던 배경에는 우리의 그 수출 시장으로서 미국이 매우 호혜적인 시장 접근을 허용했다는 측면도 기억할 필요가 있습니다. 건국 이후에 우리나라가 자본주의 모델을 만들어가는 과정에서 미국식 시장 경제 모델을 기반으로 해서 국가가 조금 더 개입의 강도를 높임으로써 재벌 시스템과 같은 것들을 만들어냈고요. 또 하나는 이제 미국에서 이제 이른바 신고전주의 경제학을 공부하고 온 많은 학자와 관료들이 한국 경제의 성장 전략을 짜는 그 기본적인 플레이어의 역할을 했던 것이죠.
In sync with South Korea's modernization, the Korea-U.S. alliance developed into an economic partnership. In 1982, South Korea's trade balance with the U.S. swung to surplus for the first time. The bilateral free trade agreement reached in 2007 was another watershed for the two countries' cooperation in the economic sector.
한미 FTA 협상을 통해 우리는 99% 이상, 미국은 100% 품목에 대한 관세를 철폐하게 되었습니다.
On November 25, 2009, South Korea joined the Development Aid Committee of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, becoming an aid provider. It was no longer an aid recipient.
대미 지원이 그때 총 통틀어서 뭐 전쟁 직후에 한 27, 8억 달러 정도 된다라고 이야기하는데 지금 우리나라가 해외에 지원하는 어떤 해외 개발도상국에 지원하는 그런 ODA라고 보통 이야기하는데 지원금이 약 1년 한 25억 달러 정도 되거든요. 원조를 통해서 우리나라에 도움을 줬지만 결국 이런 원조를 통해서 한국이 산업이 발전하게 되고 이 산업 발전을 통해서 경제적으로도 가장 중요한 파트너 중 하나로 미국이 입지하고 있다라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다.
Last year, South Korea's exports to the U.S. grew 14.5% on year to top $100 billion for the first time. It was thanks to robust exports of semiconductors, electric automobiles, and batteries, the flagship items for their cooperation in supply chains.
특히 이제 코로나19 사태쯤에 반도체 공급이 제대로 안 되다 보니까 미국의 자동차 생산도 안 되고 다른 가전제품 생산 역시 굉장히 늦어졌던 그리고 출하량이 굉장히 줄어들었던 사태가 발생했는데 그만큼 반도체가 흔히 말하는 모든 디지털 부분의 핵심이 되고요. 한국이 어떤 이런 반도체 부분, 특히 메모리 반도체 부분에서는 세계 제1의 생산국이기 때문에 경제적으로 중요성이 굉장히 높다라고 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다.
Investment has also significantly increased. In particular, South Korea's direct investment in the U.S. nearly tripled from an average of $3.48 billion following the effectuation of the free trade deal. As discussions on a free trade pact in the defense industry began on the back of last year's Seoul, Washington summit, South Korea is aiming to advance into the world's largest defense market.
아울러 양국은 미래 먹거리로 부상 중인 방산 분야의 FTA라 할 수 있는 국방 상호 조달 협정 협의를 개시하기로 하였습니다.
Economic cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. have been further evolving into an economic security alliance since South Korea joined the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework last May.
미국은 기본적으로 이 기술 문제를 그냥 중립적인 하나의 테크놀로지로 인식하기보다는 자유주의 진영 국가들은 기술을 통해서 산업을 혁신시키고 인간의 삶을 개선하는 반면에 권위주의 국가 또는 사회주의 국가들은 기술을 활용해서 인간의 자유를 억압하고 권위주의 체제를 강화한다라고 하는 인식을 강하게 갖고 있습니다. 반도체 동맹이라든가 이러한 그 미국의 동맹의 재구성이라고 하는 것도 이런 배경을 깔고 있거든요.
The Korea-U.S. alliance has become more comprehensive to include security, cutting-edge technology, and economic cooperation. In order to move forward toward the next 70 years, what should they do?
미국에서 한국보다 훨씬 더 좋은 제품을 만들 수가 있다 그러면 한국이 공급망 내의 어떤 중요성이 확 떨어지게 되고 미국과 한국 간의 어떤 경제 안보 파트너로서의 역할이 떨어질 수밖에 없거든요. 그 말은 한국이 지속적으로 경쟁력을 유지할 수 있게 국가, 최근에 다시 말해서 산업 정책을 굉장히 강하게 드라이브를 해야 된다는 이야기고요. 이런 하에서만 서로의 동맹이 와해되지 않고 이해관계가 잘 맞은 상태에서 서로 시너지를 낼 수 있는 구조로 갈 수 있다고 보시면 될 것 같습니다.
At first, the Korea-U.S. alliance was asymmetric due to the disparity of power. Now the two allies as economic partners are turning their ties into a more cooperative and complementary one on equal terms. South Korea, once a recipient of U.S. aid, has now grown into Washington's key partner in sharing the values of the market economy. And same goes for the field of security. South Korea's defense spending stood at $50.2 billion in 2021, ranking number 10 in the world, while its military power improved to the world's 6th in 2022. Seoul's contribution to the cost of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea has also increased greatly to $890 million, according to Foreign Ministry data from 2021. So once a fledgling country that relied heavily on America's military strength has now emerged as a global military powerhouse and a key U.S. ally. But despite the strong military ties, North Korea has only intensified its nuclear and missile threats. There were 12 North Korean military provocations this year alone, and on April 13th, the North test launched a solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time. This is probably why more than 6 in 10 South Koreans support an even stronger Korea-U.S. alliance in a recent survey. Then what have Presidents Yoon and Biden agreed upon during their talks in terms of security cooperation? Take a look. Following the longer-than-expected 80-minute summit, Presidents Yoon Suk Yeol and Joe Biden announced the Washington Declaration at the White House.
북한의 핵 공격 시 즉각적인 정상 간 협의를 갖기로 했으며 이를 통해 미국의 핵무기를 포함하여 동맹의 모든 전력을 사용한 신속하고 압도적이며 결정적인 대응을 취하기로 약속했습니다.
The main idea of the Washington Declaration is establishing a nuclear consultative group. Assistant minister-level officials from the two countries will hold quarterly meetings to discuss the planning and operation of nuclear and strategic weapons. They will also discuss the efficient operation of the U.S.'s nuclear assets and South Korea's conventional weapons. The two countries will also hold a simulated drill in order to effectively respond to North Korea's nuclear threats.
I think more than ever, South Korea can be assured of the U.S. commitment to do whatever it takes, including the possible use of nuclear weapons to defend the Republic of Korea and to respond to any North Korean attack. And by memorializing this commitment in the Washington Declaration, the United States and South Korea have added a very important new dimension to the alliance.
The U.S. has discussed nuclear weapons operations with South Korea through the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group, but it does not share information on operating extended deterrence in a contingency. Analysts say the establishment of the Nuclear Consultative Group is the first step by the U.S. to institutionalize extended deterrence.
NCG is a different name for the existing consultative mechanism between the two allies, which is Deterrence Strategy Committee. We have lots of consultative mechanisms, KEAT, SBI, and EDSCG, and DSC. We have regular meetings at least twice a year. Perhaps we can have frequent meetings than before. That's a plus.
The U.S. promise to dispatch strategic nuclear submarines is regarded as a way to boost South Korea's trust in its nuclear umbrella.
Nuclear submarine that carries ballistic missiles is one of the pillars of the U.S. nuclear triad, and it can carry low-yield nuclear weapons, which can be very much usable in a nuclear crisis. Frequent visit by the SSBN to South Korean ports can happen naturally because of the frequent visits by the SSBN to Guam these days.
The South Korean people can, as a result of these visits, be reassured that these ships and the weapons they carry are dedicated to their security and defense, just as they are dedicated to that of the United States. No less importantly, North Korea knows very well the role and mission of these ships and the weapons that they carry.
The South Korean and U.S. presidents issued a strong warning against China and Russia for escalating tensions in the Taiwan Strait and Ukraine while overlooking North Korea's provocations.
President Yoon and his government have made very clear the principles that the Republic of Korea stands for, including respect for territorial sovereignty and borders, the peaceful resolution of international disputes, the importance of open sea lines of communication and trade, and opposition to any attempts to change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait by force. The United States respects and shares these positions and principles, as do other U.S. allies.
Regarding North Korea, President Biden warned of the end of the regime for the first time.
A nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies or partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of whatever regime were to take such an action.
South Korea and the U.S. also vowed punishment and retaliation in a move to deter North Korea's nuclear provocations. Late last month, the nuclear-powered USS Nimitz appeared off the coast of Busan. The aircraft carrier is capable of carrying some 6,000 crew members in about 90 planes. Called the floating airbase, it is one of the U.S. strategic assets. With the USS Nimitz mobilized, the navies of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan held joint anti-submarine drills in international waters south of the Korean peninsula.
이번 대잠전 훈련은 최근 북한의 고도화되는 SLBM 등 수중 위협에 대한 한미일의 대응 능력을 향상시키기 위해서 마련되었습니다.
South Korea and the U.S. staged the combined Freedom Shield military exercise for 11 days in late March. They also expanded other field training exercises. The U.S.'s strategic bombers B-1B and B-52H were frequently spotted flying over the Korean peninsula. These moves are aimed at better countering heightened nuclear threats from North Korea.
2017년 말에 사실상 전략핵 완성이라고 북한은 주장을 하면서 이제 미국 본토를 타격할 수 있는 그런 대륙간 탄도 미사일과 이제 상당히 이제 타격력이 큰 그런 핵무기를 개발을 했습니다. 최근에는 이와 조금 더 다른 양상의 핵무기를 개발을 하면서 사실상 남한을 어떻게 보면 우리를 이제 겨냥하고 있다고 볼 수가 있습니다.
At a session held in last September, North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly approved a Nuclear Force Policy Act threatening to launch nuclear preemptive strikes against South Korea. The North disclosed an operation map with key South Korean targets marked. It also fired a series of short-range ballistic missiles from mobile launchers and trains, as well as a reservoir, a golf course, and a silo. It eventually unveiled a tactical nuclear warhead to show off its nuclear combat capabilities.
우리가 그 언제든 그 어디에든 핵무기를 사용할 수 있게 완벽하게 준비되어야 우리 국권과 제도와 인민을 감히 건드릴 수 없게 된다고 말씀하셨습니다.
The regime also exposed on purpose its nuclear missiles directly aimed at South Korea, as well as supersized multiple rocket launchers, short-range ballistic missiles, the unmanned submarine Hail, and cruise missiles.
전략핵과 달리 전술핵은 이제 전장에서 충분히 독자적으로 사용할 수 있는 그런 무기고 어디서 어떻게 쏘는지를 파악할 수 없는 그런 투발 수단을 개발을 했거든요. 그래서 전술핵을 그런 투발 수단에 사용을 한다면 미국뿐만 아니라 일본, 한국 누구도 사실 이 북핵으로부터 자유로울 수 없는 그런 환경이 됐습니다.
North Korea's nuclear threats are directly targeting South Korea. But international sanctions are growing ineffective with the North under the wings of Russia and China. This is why there are some views that South Korea needs to develop and possess its own nuclear weapons.
북한이 화성 18호 등을 통해서 미국 본토를 타격할 수 있는 능력을 갖추게 된 지금 과연 미국이 이제 서울을 위해서 이제 뉴욕을 포기할 수 있냐 뭐 이런 얘기를 할 수 있지 않습니까? 그것은 이제 미국의 의지력을 그러니까 동맹에 대한 의지, 확장 핵억제에 대한 의지 이것이 이제 과연 정말인가에 대해서 어떤 확인을 시켜줄 필요가 이번 한미 이제 정상회담을 통해서 있다는 거죠.
North Korea said that it test-fired the solid-fuel ICBM Hwasong-18 on April 13th. Analysts said the use of solid fuel can reduce the weight of a ballistic missile by 2/3 and the launch time by over 80%.
반드시 불과 극복의 위협에 직면하게 만들어 잘못된 저들의 선택에 대하여 후회하고 절망에 빠지게 할 것이라고 확언하셨습니다.
Amid concerns that North Korea's solid-fuel ICBM could be a game-changer, the proposal for South Korea's nuclear armament is surfacing despite the lack of feasibility. The latest ROK-U.S. summit is predicted to emphasize Washington's extended deterrence and the ironclad alliance between the two countries. It will also seek to discourage North Korea's provocations and quell the debate over South Korea's independent nuclear armament.
한국이 자체 핵무장을 하기 위해서는 넘어야 될 그 장애물들이 대단히 많고요. 국제적으로도 대단히 많은 논란의 소지가 있습니다. 북한의 핵 능력이 점차 고도화되는 반면에 한미 양국의 확장 억제가 약속이 아니라 실제적인 그 훈련으로서 입증되기 때문에 그런 면에서 이제 핵무장 논리 또는 핵무장 여론을 좀 잠재우는 효과가 있지 않을까 이렇게 추측을 할 수가 있겠습니다.
Ahead of the visit to the U.S., President Yoon said in an interview with the Washington Post that South Korea's security concerns were too urgent to delay cooperation with Japan.
이번 한미 정상회담의 성과를 기초로 해서 한미 양국 간의 동맹 구조 발전이 물론 중요하고요. 좀 더 나아가서는 한미일 간의 안보 협력을 어떻게 확대하고 이 한미일 삼각협력 과정을 통해서 북한의 핵능력 고도화를 어떻게 통제하느냐가 어떻게 보면 더 중요한 문제로 부상하고 있다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다.
Observers predict that frequent nuclear provocations by North Korea will only lead South Korea, the U.S., and Japan to speed up their discussions on bilateral or trilateral cooperation and security. President Yoon Suk Yeol's state visit to the U.S., marking the 17th anniversary of the two nations alliance, has successfully come to an end now. Our last question for the AI-powered chatbot is about the future of the Seoul-Washington alliance following the latest trip. Based on the recent state visit of South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol to the U.S., it appears that the Korea-U.S. alliance will continue to be strong and focused on a broad range of issues beyond the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. The U.S. has promised to dispatch strategic nuclear submarines to boost South Korea's trust in its nuclear umbrella. Military exercises and drills have been held to improve the two nations' capabilities to tackle underwater threats posed by the North. The Korea-U.S. alliance is expected to continue to be an unprecedentedly successful example of an alliance that has expanded to include all aspects, serving to dispel public concerns about North Korea's nuclear threats. The two countries are very important partners to one another, and they will only further strengthen cooperation in the sectors of economy and security. 70 years of building trust and solidarity. South Korea and the U.S. have developed a wartime alliance into a greater partnership. And further solidifying that alliance, those ties would be the next task left for the two sides in the coming 7 decades.